All right. Now, some information that has transpired regarding the sanctuary city before Harry makes his presentation. Yesterday, I attended District 10 meeting for the Republican Party. They made a resolution similar to what has transpired here, and they adopted it unanimously for all of the 5 counties that they represent. So they're on board. This morning, I got a phone call from Representative Gary Howe's office, and House Bill 227 was introduced from the committee regarding sanctuary 2, and that passed 9-2. And and I believe Representative Shane Hernandez is here, and he can address that also when he comes to do a legislative update. But I got the email on that. So that's another thing that's transpired. So that represents the state of Michigan adhering to this. But my understanding is it's got to go through the state, and then the state, it's only a resolution. I think the Senate will do the same thing. It needs no signature it's not legislation. It is just a resolution. And as you'll see the presentation in the slides after Harry, there are some terms that will be addressed. The first two are obviously the Constitution, the federal Constitution, and the state constitutional provision dealing with the right to bear arms. So those will be up on the clipboard. And at this time, I'm going to ask that Harry Akers come before us and make a presentation on exactly his involvement in this and how he got involved in what has transpired. So here you go. Mr. Harry Akers. You're the county commissioner. You are recognized as the county chair of the sanctuary.
Right.
Okay. So inform the public exactly what your identity is and so forth.
Can I use this mic? Okay. I'm going to sit down. I don't know about a presentation here, but I was asked if I would just explain how I got involved and why I brought it forward. And what happened was that, like the sheriff had said that you saw in the video, I was watching what was going on in Virginia, like everybody else, and what was going on here in Michigan. Our governor signed a letter with 12 other governors saying that she wanted and they wanted universal background checks. She wants to outlaw what she calls assault weapons, even though she doesn't have the definition of what that is yet. She wants to ban what she calls high-capacity magazines. And I just saw another legislator, which isn't our governor, but they have now changed that a little bit to where they're saying it's not just a high-capacity magazine in their terms, it's any gun that's capable of holding a high-capacity magazine, which anybody that knows anything about guns knows that that's every semi-automatic and every handgun, rifle, it won't matter. That changes the definition of an assault weapon to anything that you own, basically. She also wants to have stricter reporting requirements on all gun purchases. So even you can't give it to your kids, you can't give it to anybody else, you're going to have to report it to the government and be under their thumbs. And then even the red flag laws, which violate many more of our constitutional rights. And then there's a whole bunch, I know the sheriff again alluded to this in the video, but these are all the bills that were in front of the legislature last year. It's 2 pages, they're just stuck together. But anyway, take my word for it. I'll show it to you later if you want to see it. There are tons of things that they're trying to push through. So these people that are saying, oh, you're fear-mongering, you're crazy, there's not all that going on, it is going on. And it's going on all the time. And it's not just gun rights. Like Mr. Freed said to me earlier, it's not just the Second Amendment, it's all of our rights. They're whittling away at our liberties all the time. Every regulation they pass. Anyway, I'm getting off topic. But so anyway, that's why just after Christmas, I saw on Facebook the Michigan 2A Sanctuary county's not website, but Facebook page. And so it interested me. I thought it made a lot of sense. And so I made a call to the people that are running that, which is Jeff Faust and Randy Bishop. Told them I was interested. They said, okay, we'll call you back. I think they were checking me out, and they found out I had a big mouth. So they said, we want you to chair for Lapeer County. And I told them I would, as long as we could keep it civil. I didn't want it to be like a lot of other counties that I saw where all the guys were going in with their bandoleros across their shoulder and everything, and they had their AR-15s and everything, making a statement in camouflage and all of that. I thought, boy, this is common sense. There's nothing here to be against. And I know most of the commissioners. I've worked with them over the past years, and I felt they were common sense guys and friends and neighbors, and we wouldn't have any problem. So I took, and at first I didn't even have the resolution yet because it was still being written, but I started calling different people. I called the sheriff. He was kind enough to have me into his office, and we met, and I talked to Rick Warren. Rick Warren picked right up on it. It made absolute sense to him. There was no misunderstanding about words or anything. I talked to Linda Jarvis, who's my commissioner. She was on board in a heartbeat. She knew exactly what we were talking about. No confusion at all. I talked to Gary Roy, the chairperson of our Board of Commissioners. He was right on it. He knew exactly what it was about. And then I talked to Dial Henning and got a little fuzzy, but he said that he was for the Second Amendment, so I felt comfortable that he was going to be on our side. And same thing with Lenny Snyder. There was a little bit of hesitation to be right with it like the others, but he said that he was for the Second Amendment, so I thought we didn't have a problem. I also talked to Ian Kempf, and then I talked with our prosecuting attorney, and when I got the resolution, the sheriff and I sent it to the commissioners. I think the sheriff was really the official person to do that. I was just being, I didn't know what I was doing, so I was just trying to cover all the bases is what it boils down to. So anyway, sheriff did his part, and I thought that it was going to go through just fine. So that's how it got introduced. And you had said at one point you wanted me to read it?
I would like you to read it. Do you have it?
I do.
I think it would be beneficial to the public if we could. So the audience knows, obviously you see the constitutional provisions, state and federal, right on the board here. If you go to the next slide, you will see in the resolution some of the problems with the language that some people had. If you go to the next slide.
Work it out.
Okay.
There we go.
Technology. So here's some of the terms that I was able to discern. And the one key term that seems to trouble everybody is the word sanctuary. And there's a reason why they use the word sanctuary, but this is the terminology that's used. Basically, summarized, it's a safe haven, okay? But if you are a constitutional protected person, every place in the country, you take an oath of office, you adhere to the constitutional provisions. If you're a citizen, you have these rights. They're vested. But I put this term down there. I put the term declared. Do we have one other term? I thought there was one other term I added there. I guess we didn't get that one. All right. Resolution, I think, was the other one, which is basically a term that it's not controlling as to law, but it is a clarification of the position of the county. So I just wanted everybody to know that. So if you could read that, it might be beneficial.
Okay. So the title of it is Lapeer County Board of Commissioners, County of Lapeer, Resolution to declare Lapeer County to be a Second Amendment sanctuary county. The County Board of Commissioners of the County of Lapeer, State of Michigan states, whereas the County Board of Commissioners of the County of Lapeer, State of Michigan, pursuant to state statute, is vested with the authority of administrating the affairs of the county government of Lapeer County, Michigan, and is organized as a body corporate with powers and immunities provided by laws, and to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the residents of Lapeer County and the employees of the Lapeer County government. And whereas the Second Amendment to the United States Constitution, ratified in 1791 as part of the Bill of Rights, protects the right of the people to keep and bear arms. And whereas the United States Supreme Court in District of Columbia v. Heller, with a bunch of legal numbers, affirmed an individual's right to possess a firearm unconnected with service in a militia and to use that firearm for traditionally lawful purposes such as self-defense within the home. And whereas the United States Supreme Court in McDonald v. Chicago, with some more legal numbers, affirmed that the right of an individual to keep and bear arms as protected under the Second Amendment is incorporated to the states by the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment. And whereas the United States Supreme Court in United States v. Miller, some more numbers to show what it is, opined that possession or use of a firearm that has some reasonable relationship to the preservation of a well-regulated militia is protected by the Second Amendment. And whereas Article 1, Section 6 of the Michigan Constitution, 1963, provides that every person has a right to keep and bear arms for the defense of himself and the state. And whereas it is the desire of this board to declare its support of the Second Amendment to the United States Constitution and to the provisions of the Michigan Constitution, which protect Lapeer County citizens' individual rights to keep and bear arms, and whereas each Lapeer County Commissioner, as provided by Article 9, Section 1 of the Michigan Constitution, 1963, took an oath to support the United States Constitution and the Michigan Constitution. Now, therefore, it is hereby resolved by the Lapeer County Board of Commissioners that the County of Lapeer, Michigan, be and hereby is declared to be a Second Amendment sanctuary county. It is further resolved that this board affirms its support for the Lapeer County Sheriff and the Lapeer County Prosecuting Attorney in the exercise of their sound discretion to not enforce against any citizen an unconstitutional firearms law. Be it further resolved that the board directs its staff to forward a copy of this resolution to the county's fellow county elected officials, the Michigan State Legislature, House of Representatives, and state senators, the Governor of Michigan, and all of the Michigan U.S. Congressmen. This resolution was adopted by the Lapeer County Board of Commissioners at a regular meeting held at Lapeer County Board Chambers, Lapeer County Complex Building, Lapeer County, Michigan, by an affirmative vote of no less than 4 of the members of the county. Do you want me to keep going with all of that?
No, that's
okay.
I think. All right, and Harry advocates he's we the people. This is why he did it. We the people adhere to this Second Amendment, and he got involved and he did this and he accomplished this by going through the appropriate avenue. Now, what does that mean to us? We have the 2 chief law enforcement officers in the county here. We have one is the sheriff, and I'm going to ask Sheriff Scott McKenna to you've already heard him briefly introduce how he feels this is a symbolic system and is a message to our legislature. So I'm going to ask him to come up here and address you and inform you as to what his position is on this particular resolution, followed by the our prosecuting attorney, Mike Sharkey, who will also tell you how he chooses to enforce this provision. It's not an enforcement, it is a resolution, but how he will approach legal aspects of the Second Amendment gun issue. And by the way, before I make any comment, today we know that there's cases pending out there. We're not going to discuss any pending lawsuit or anything that's going on, all right? You can, when you ask questions, ask hypothetical questions, but when it deals directly with a case that's pending in a court, we are not going to address that for legal reasons and otherwise. So, Scott, thank you very much, and thank you very much for coming.
I probably won't need it.
Well,
Otherwise I'll blow you right out of the back of the house here.
Will it record?
Is that okay? Okay, perfect. So, oh, that's loud. So thank you for having me. I appreciate it, and Bill, I got to thank you for the video. That's the first video in my 3 years that there wasn't a glare coming off my head, so I don't know how you did that, but that was fantastic. So Bill's going to be going with me everywhere now to edit out that glare. Thank you for having us, and I do want to mention with Harry briefly. I just came, and I know Senator Daley just did also, but I was at MTA prior to this at 5:30, and then Kevin had to do something at 7. And I was talking about this because this got brought up of exactly what does this mean, Scott, and what are the things that we're talking about with it. One of the things that I said to all the supervisors in the township was, I think there's 82 other counties that really would have liked a Harry, as into how he handled it. And even with our administrators, with all the ones, Kevin, Jim, all the ones that were doing a lot of the Lapeer stuff, this was really well run. And the thing about it is when I say that, you go, okay, really well run. What do you mean by that? Folks, there's nothing we get more passionate about than what we're talking about tonight, right? And we understand that. And the other part is, because if we're going to look at things, and I look at things from both sides, you heard me say on there, I'm the sheriff for everybody. So I will listen and sit down with everybody. I might disagree with you, and that's okay. That's why we have that ability to do some of these things. But ultimately, when we sat down through these and started talking about them, sometimes we're our own worst enemies. Some of that stuff on social media where we were coming on and some of the things that we were saying, and I give a ton of credit to all the administrators that handled that, but they went on and said, this is not what we're about. Okay? We're here to talk about our constitutional rights and the things that we are standing together to achieve as a whole, as a county. Harry was on top of it. He explained all of the different things with the courthouse. He talked about the way that it was going to go with public time. Everybody walked in very well prepared. That scares people. When we're passionate about something and we know that we stand firm with our rights and we come in prepared and professional, sends a pretty good message, sends a pretty good tone. Big part of that was Harry, and I'm very, very grateful. So I'd like to give Harry a round of applause. Harry met with everybody. Because of the passionate side, and I'll say this, and some of you know me better than others, I'm very blunt, okay? And if I don't know an answer, I'm going to tell you I don't know an answer. I'm not going to try to BS you. I never do that. Truth of the matter is, and I say it with all the commissioners in here, there was nobody that's against the Second Amendment, okay? There was some wording things here that might, unfortunately, fortunately, however you want to look at it, in the roles that we play, we have to look at these different things. It's our duty to be elected for those things. So I say for them that this was pretty easy in Lapeer County. I'm sure, and I know the ones that are in here that are following the stuff across the state, it's not going like this in other counties. Okay, there's some out there that are really, really divided, and unfortunately it's getting really ugly. And unfortunately, to be honest with you, a lot of people seeing a lot of stupid things, especially in public forums. So what is this part of the sanctuary county? The truth of the matter is, and if we're going to be brutally honest, and I know Commissioner Kemp asked me the question in the video there, that was a very valid question because I got asked it probably 5,000 times in that 4 weeks. What does this actually mean, Scott? So our existing laws that are on the books, the one that came up all the time, and I mentioned it in there briefly, was, so basically someone's going to be able to get out of Jackson prison for homicide, rape, whatever it is, and have every gun right that all of these law-abiding citizens have. That's what they believed this was. So remember what happens in a lot of the pieces that we have, even in our big picture of national news right now? We just get pieces. A lot of times when we're not educated on what we're actually talking about, boy, we go backwards, don't we? And unfortunately, I think we did that in some of the ways here. I said in there of the no disrespect to the other side. I've had hundreds of them come into my office and sit down. There were some valid points that I understood with them. The hard part is I have a lot of life experiences in law enforcement. For 26 years, and obviously my last 3 in Lapeer, but before that I was in Genesee County and in the Flint area. Problem with that is I am strong, and because of it, to be honest with you, if you would have said when I got in law enforcement at 21 years old, I wouldn't have had the same speech in front of you because I was a kid. I didn't know what was important to me. Hell, I didn't even know what the Constitution afforded me. And then all of a sudden I saw life change, and I saw crimes committed, and I saw good people having horrible things happen to them. And I saw people that were working their butts off 40, 50, 60 hours a week trying to make it. But sometimes in government, we were more focused on them and what they were doing instead of the people that we should be focused on. So when this came up, the lady had mentioned of that there is nothing happening in Lansing. There's nothing, and I won't say the term she said because I don't want to, you'll know who it was, but it's untrue. Tons of things in legislation right now. But here's the truth of the matter is, Kevin and Mike and I met on Friday. We're a few votes from this being a whole different conversation. Okay? And the problem is, and I'm saying this because I'm sure there's some people that are on both sides here. I'm sure there's some people here that are against this. And I'm going to tell you the same thing that I said to you individually. I'm not arguing with you. I'm here just saying my life experiences and what I've seen. If we regulate and pick away at these gun rights, what we need to understand, and unfortunately 23 years of the Flint area, running the violent crimes, I've investigated hundreds of homicides. If you take away guns and you regulate guns, who's not going to have guns? The good people. Ultimately, what does that make good people? Victims. The bad guys are going to have guns no matter what, folks. And the problem is, when we talk about all the different things in there, yes, I can have some valid conversations on both sides to where people go, okay, but this and that, okay, I understand. And if we're just going to paint this with a broad brush or a simple brush, you got to look at the big picture here. The sanctuary county isn't changing anything we have on the books. It isn't changing something we're looking at in the future. I know I said in there, but we have to come together and say no. People say, okay, well, Virginia. And there's a lot of differences between Virginia and Michigan. You guys know that, of even how they do law and Commonwealth and all the other stuff with it. But the problem is, we're not just talking about Virginia. It's happening in Lansing. Now, do I personally, in front of you, say, do I believe right now that anything is going to change with this stuff? I don't believe so. Not with our House and Senate. What about 2 years from now? So this message is important. And this message is good for people to say, for all of us to understand and people to go. And I think we ended up being third, the third area that we were county-wise, third or fourth. And we're at, I know as of Friday it was 13. I don't know, has there been more added since then? Okay, that's I knew it was close. Send a pretty good message, okay? And then tomorrow, or tonight, Livingston comes. Then tomorrow, so-and-so comes. Send the message of the people that we elected of what's important. Now, I'm not saying to you that there's not arguments on different sides, and I'll be happy to have discussions, not arguments. We're all in here for the same purpose, just like the commissioners are all in here for the same purpose. There's things that we have to look at as law, things because I get screamed at from the other side also. I hope you realize that's probably why I am bald, because I've been doing it so long. The word that I use there, this is symbolic. And it's about time we start sending strong messages, how we feel, how we stand. And ultimately, the nice part about it is, truthfully, we live in Lapeer County. Because ultimately in this county, you're not going to find it much easier in this county to see. And only reason I say that, and our poor girls, if you've ever met, which I know many of you have, Linda or Emma up front, I have never seen so many guns purchased in one county in my entire life. I swear to gosh, I was going to go to the commissioners next Thursday to ask to add somebody just to do gun registrations. And then my favorite part of it is the 2 times. One just came by and the other one's coming up. Christmas, tax return time. The guns just go through the roof in our county. But that's a positive, okay? The truth of the matter is, and many of you, I see a lot of you that have been in my programs, my CPL stuff, or Stand Your Ground stuff, I say it to everybody else. My wife went through CPL I want my wife carrying a gun. I want you carrying a gun. If my wife and 2 children are in Kroger's and I'm not with them, and gosh forbid somebody's there that something has happened, I need a good person to step in and protect my family. I think as a whole, and I won't go any further, but this is sending a message, and this is symbolic. Is there any major change? Because I'm not going to lie to people, because I had people ask me that. Is there anything major change that we did by doing this? No. But ultimately, brought us together, makes our voice louder, and we just keep continuing that fight. I appreciate the time.
I believe all our speakers will stay after to answer questions to the public, but we're going to have an extensive question and answer period. This is a very emotional issue for a lot of people, but for me, I stand before you. It's a constitutional issue. It's only one aspect of the Bill of Rights, and it's an important issue, and Scott and I have talked about this extensively. So our next speaker is Mike Sharkey, our county prosecuting attorney, who will address all the legal ramifications, and particularly as to the law, not as to the resolution, because the resolution is not a law. It's just an affirmation. It's as Scott, as I understand it, it's just a message. So with that, Mike Sharkey. You can sit or you can stand.
Okay, thanks. Thank you very much for the Tea Party, for having me. Thank you, Bill, for coming and asking me to come. Thank you, Maurice. I appreciate you coming in and inviting me to come. These are great opportunities in the great country that we live in to voice your thoughts, your opinions, and let those who are elected know how you feel about issues. For me, the Second Amendment is a no-brainer issue. Those of us who have grown up in small rural communities like this, grew up with hunting issues, we grew up with guns, and we have no hesitation in saying we support the Constitution. But when you're an elected official, you also have the added responsibility to uphold the Constitution. Those of us who are elected swear to an oath. That oath is to uphold the law, the Constitution of the United States. I can bore you with the detail and the fine letter of law, the hair-splitting distinctions on one issue or another, but the sheriff has sort of stole my thunder. And I should have done something better about the arrangement. We should have had Scott speak last. He's a clean-up batter type here. You let those who are of less significance speak first here, and then he cleans it up for all of us. But instead, we left that for Kevin Daley. And Kevin Daley is the one who is actually the person who should be third on this and batting cleanup on the issue, because the issue of this resolution really is directed towards the public policymakers, and that's the legislative body of the State House, the State Senate, and that's the process. So all I can say is I'm very supportive of it. When Harry called me, I had no hesitations of telling Harry, look, I'm on board 100%. You can count me in, because I've never once enforced any law that wasn't constitutional. And that's a good key to know, and I can back that up with not just my word. It's since I've been your prosecuting attorney for the last 3 years, we've taken a number of issues up on appeal. In fact, since I've been your prosecutor, we've had over 70 appeals to the Court of Appeals. And the issues on each and every one of those ties in directly a constitutional issues. But I'm glad we have our commissioners here, because I have a bone to pick with them. And I don't mean to put them on spot here, but I do that. I take these cases up on appeal and do so not because I have the funding. We are a small office. We don't have an appellate division, and somehow we have to squeeze that in. And so then when my good friends who are the members of the board who say to me, well, we need data. We need, well, how many cases do you have? How many people do you really need? And I appreciate that. I think those are fair questions. But never in the stats is there a column for appeals. And the reason I bring that up is to give you the idea that I'm passionate about it too. The Constitution is obviously our most important document, and likewise, all those amendments. Have I run out the clock and left nothing for Kevin? Or should we let Kevin speak on the legislative process? But before I give it to you, Kevin, let me tell you this. On my end, I'm on the enforcement side. I must be honest with you. I don't see issues about gun control come across my desk. And again, that's the public policy. You understand the basic government that we were taught in school, the civics, it's the separation of powers doctrine. We have the judicial branch, we have the legislative branch, and we have the executive branch. I fall into the executive branch. I'm on the enforcement side. I take orders. I follow what the law is given, what the legislature passes. That's me. And as a consequence of that, to dovetail on what the sheriff said too, you have to be careful about having someone who is in the position of enforcement utilizing too much discretion. What you want in somebody who is on the enforcement side is someone who will be independent as they possibly can be, but also passionate about what they're doing. So the process is going to, before it even gets to me, would be already debated at the state level for that, and that's an important part. Then when it comes to me for issues, I have to make decisions. So since I've been in office, I don't hesitate on charging someone with a criminal offense who has committed a felony offense and used a firearm in the process. Part of my oath is to enforce the law, and if the debate on this issue is no infringement on gun rights, I must take a stand and say, I have to enforce those who commit crimes and do not have a lawful, that's not a lawful use of a firearm. So I must enforce that. We also have, what comes across my desk, are those who are felons, who are in possession of firearms. And we take those issues quite seriously. Those who use a firearm in the commission of a crime, the way our legislature has dictated the punishment for those are mandatory 2 years in prison, no discretion by a sentencing judge as to what that sentence is, and that's on top of what someone would get for, let's say, an armed robbery. So I must tell you, I do enforce those, and how that all ties into this conversation is, I don't think there's anyone in here that we have to worry about as far as it goes on committing criminal acts. Is there anybody in here who's willing to do that? There's nobody here who's not. So unfortunately, those of us who are in this process, I deal with a subset of our community, and it's not the honor students who come to me and those I have to sort of find a way to seek justice and enforce the law. I think all of you would agree with me that those who have a gun and use it in an unlawful purpose, an armed robbery, would be someone that you would want me to enforce and do that. So let's be clear about those. I'm not going to change my position on those. I am going to enforce the law, and I'm going to do so with absolutely the greatest effort and analysis and review to make sure that we're doing the right thing. I look forward to having questions from you. I think this is great as far as the process goes. I like Scott's word on the use of the resolution is a symbolic. That's a great word for this as to what this means. But since I am in the business of splitting hairs over the definitions of words, here I must say that I'm proud of that selection. He didn't come to me for that answer, by the way. He thought that one up on his own, so I have to give him full credit. But I don't think I could have given him a better word for that, and I'm grateful that this community is willing to voice their opinions and let the elected officials know how you feel. So thank you for having me. Are we done? Am I done? Am I going to be asked one question?
Yeah, you're going to be asked questions, but...
All right, well, I'll sit down.
Okay, you don't want to... Okay, we'll address... All right. That brings us to presenter number 3, which is... Now, this young man here just got an education from the most recent candidate for the Democratic Party on how to be an agriculture... By the way, now, Kevin has been doing it wrong his entire life, according to Mr. Bloomberg. Apparently, you didn't dig the hole correctly. You didn't put the seeding correctly. This is the chairman of the Committee for the Agriculture for the State of Michigan, our Senator, Kevin Daley, and he will address some of our legislative issues.
Thank you. Whoops. You know, what a roundup to follow here, you know, between our sheriff and then our prosecutor, and then you got me, and I was feeling pretty cocky until I saw that report that, you know, I have a lot less gray matter there than I thought I had for all these years, but, you know, and what's interesting is, so in our caucus room, we have 4 full-time agriculture people, 3 full-time farmers that were there in the legislature, 1 guy that ran a grain elevator for years and comes from a family farm, and we all sit on the same side of the table we're at in our caucus room, and I said, man, this room's going to tip over with all that extra brain weight on the other side of the room. So it was kind of a blow to us when we heard that, but hey, we live with what we live with. But if you notice, my gray matter isn't as good because I'm the only guy that brought notes. But there's a reason for that, and because, you know, and Scott hit on that at the very beginning, that this is it's a more of a symbolic gesture of what you're sending us in the legislature. We're the ones that have to vote for these issues and have to take all those issues into consideration. So I can tell you that the statement, I think it was Ronald Reagan, said that we're only 1 election away from chaos. And so fortunately, right now, you've got 2/3 of the legislature, and I'm not generally a partisan guy, but I'm sorry, this is a Republican and a Democratic issue because the Democrats are the ones that push gun control, and our governor's the only one that talks about it now. The reason I brought notes is because I've actually got, we looked up exactly what bills have been introduced in the legislature and where they came from. So, and we've got Shane Hernandez here from the State House as well, and I don't know if he's going to get a chance to speak tonight or not, but I can tell you that there's the bills that have been issued mostly in the House side. There's there's about a dozen or maybe a little more than a dozen bills that have been introduced that are all more requirements for, you know, for instance, introduced by Representative Hope requires that a shooting facility not rent a gun to a person without first conducting a background check. So it means you couldn't go to a facility and rent a gun unless you had a background check done first. Another one that's introduced is makes it a felony to manufacture, possession, and sell 3D printed guns. The bill was referred to the Judiciary Committee. So it would be a felony to possess and sell 3D printed guns. Of course, you've got the red law bills. Those have been introduced in the House and the Senate, or the red flag bills, I mean, a group of bills. You've got another group of bills represented in the House that creates the extreme risk, these are the red flag bills, creates the Extreme Risk Protection Order Act. So the Senate has those introduced and the House does as well. In the House, we also have one that requires a background check to purchase a firearm. So we've got some good bills introduced as well. We've got bills in the House and the Senate introduced. There's half a dozen of these in there. Where these will go are yet to be seen. I'm not going to dig into that because it doesn't really make a lot of difference here tonight. The bottom line for us is that we take these things seriously. We get resolutions all the time from local communities, and we look at them, we take them concernedly. But you guys elected me, and you elected Gary Howell to represent you, me in the Senate, Gary Howell in the House. We're the people you need to be directing it to, and you also elect the governor. And that's really the people. But the key is to get this word around the whole state of Michigan, so other areas. The scary part is when you get one more, you get 56 in the House of the people that are anti-guns, and you only get 19 in the Senate, and then you've got control. If you're lucky enough to have a governor that's not anti-gun, then they can still stop it. But if that governor gets the other two, you're never going to be able to stop it. That's what happened in Virginia. So we depend on you guys' help, but the key is those elections. The key is getting out to vote, getting the people out to vote, support people to run for office that are in the same views that you believe in. And Scott hit the nail on the head. I have to represent everybody. I got elected by everybody in Lapeer, Tuscola, and Bay County. Lapeer County at this time, unless it's happened in the last day, is the only one that's adopted this resolution, to my knowledge. I don't think there's any doubt Tuscola will do it in a heartbeat. Bay County, a little different story. My understanding was they were looking at some type of a bill supporting, just saying they support the Second Amendment, which I guess is good, but it doesn't go quite as far as these resolutions do. But we're there for you. I think the best thing probably to do, Maurice, is go to questions, because I could ramble on up here forever, but I don't think that's what we want to hear about. Questions are always the way to do it.
I do, and I'm going to give Shane Hernandez an opportunity to come. But I just want to emphasize one other thing. I believe the Tea Party is very concerned with what's going on in this country. And what I see is not only an attack on your Second Amendment rights, I see an attack on the Constitution as a whole. I see a group of people out there who are professing, standing before you, saying that the president cannot even tweet because he's tweeting, and his tweets, what? That's an abridgment of his First Amendment right to speak. I mean, I'm looking all the way down the Constitution. We've got FISA, we've got search and seizure propositions, we've got gun control. People, we have to uphold our Constitution.
But another thing that we have a problem in our country and in our state is, and this is nothing against our law enforcement in Lapeer County, it is the enforcement of laws. I mean, it's all the way down to speed limit laws. I drive back and forth to Lansing every day, and you go 10 miles an hour over the speed limit. They will not pull you over until you go 10 miles over the speed limit. Then why don't we change the speed limit to 80 miles an hour instead of 70 miles an hour? That's just a little example. We don't enforce laws, and that's tyranny, as they call that eventually. Right. And I think there are people out there that don't want to enforce laws. We need to enforce laws. This happens in a lot of different areas. I have to take an oath of office when I took this position to uphold the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the state of Michigan. Now, how can I do that with legalized marijuana in Michigan? Explain that to me. I'm breaking the federal law, and I'm enforcing the Michigan law. Which one do I do? So you put me in a very horrible position. I went to the city of Lapeer and said, don't do recreational marijuana here. It's my understanding if you could fill that thing up, because I think they're going to change that, folks. They want to change that to the city of Lapeer, and that's not I don't reside in the city of Lapeer, but that's my hometown. That's what I said to them when I stood up in front of them that day. I said, this is my hometown. Let them go to another county and purchase there. If it's legal, fine. Go purchase it somewhere else. We don't need that in Lapeer County. But that's what's coming. So.
Thank you, Kevin. That's our senator. The next speaker was not necessarily on the agenda, but he so kindly wanted to participate, and I talked to him yesterday. He said he was coming here. This is Mr. Shane Hernandez. He's been a friend of the Tea Party for years, and he is the chairman of the House Appropriations Committee, and very powerful position and he's having his battles with our wonderful governor over the appropriations. But he's here today to speak on the Second Amendment issue. Thank you, Shane.
Thank you. And for those of you who don't know me, I serve the 83rd House District, which is all of Sanilac County and a portion of St. Clair County. So the neighbor to the east, I spoke with Representative Howell this morning because he is on the House Judiciary Committee, which voted on the resolution, I think House Resolution 227 this morning, which passed with all Republicans voting yes, and I believe one Democrat voted yes. I believe it was a Representative Elder that serves the Bay area, and he was a yes on that. So you guys know a little bit of history on that resolution. Same thing as what we've seen in all the counties. That resolution first was introduced with the word sanctuary in it. That word was debated, gone back and forth, was introduced without that word in it, but has passed that committee now. I believe it'll go to the Ways and Means Committee next. I would expect it to pass that and come to the House floor. And hopefully, a lot of times resolutions get voice votes, but I hope this one will get a roll call vote on the House floor so we can see where everybody's at on that issue. I think the topic has been well stated by all the other gentlemen that have spoke today. I'm not going to rehash that. I took an oath to the Constitution, and I believe the Second Amendment says what it says. And, my record shows that. What I want to talk about, elaborate a little bit on what Kevin said with the importance of a majority. I also want to talk about how there's resources out there for you guys. Kevin was going through some legislation. I don't know how many people here know, if you were to go to legislature.mi.gov, there's a bill search tool on there. You don't have to know bill numbers. You don't have to know a lot of details how to use this. You can type in a keyword. You could type in firearms or guns or Second Amendment, and it will spit out every bill that's been introduced with that topic on it. Now, when you go to those and you click on each individual bill, it'll have the bill language. Some of them will have an analysis. If they don't have an analysis, that means it probably hasn't been scheduled for a committee hearing yet. And they will give a bill history as well. So if you were to go look at the resolution that passed today, you would see on there that it was referred to committee, it had a hearing in committee, was reported out of that committee, it reported to House Ways and Means. You'd be able to track that. If it's been voted on the House floor, it'll give a vote total, and you can click on that vote total and go see who voted which way. So I urge people to go on those sites, do those searches, see what's out there, understand what bills are out there. As for the majority conversation, the conversation about how close we are to this truly going a different direction, the House last term had 63 Republicans and 47 Democrats. This term has 58 Republicans and 52 Democrats. 3 seats away from a tie, 4 seats away from a Democrat holding a gavel in the State House. You may think some of the bills you see out there are bad. Wait if they have a majority, and you will see much worse bills get introduced. A lot of them aren't going to show themselves, how radical these ideas might be until that bill might actually get passed. And you think, well, there's still the Senate. Well, once you have 2 legs of that stool, the pressure gets huge on the Senate. Right now, the House and the Senate, we work lockstep together. We make sure that we work together so that these things don't get hearings, they don't get votes. But if one of them goes, then you've got some serious pressure. And I want you to think about something. This election season, there's no Secretary of State on the ballot. There's no Attorney General on the ballot. There's no governor on the ballot. There's no state Senate on the ballot. The State House is on the ballot. This governor is going to put everything she has into making sure she has friends in the State House. The target will be on the State House and flipping 4 seats to make sure that they can start passing legislation through that State House the governor supports. So you need to keep an eye on that. You need to get out and find good candidates to support. I know you have great candidates here in Lapeer County. In fact, they might get mad at me for saying this, but you could probably go to the next county over and work over there because I think these guys are going to get reelected. I think they do a pretty good job. The last thing I want to mention, I hear a lot of pushback sometimes on, well, you guys aren't moving pro-gun legislation either. Who in this room thinks the governor will sign pro-gun legislation? Well, that's not always a great reason for not pushing some of that legislation and not voting on it. But I want you to think about something. We have a 3-seat majority. There are places that aren't like Sanilac County, St. Clair County, Lapeer County. We could put a piece of pro-gun legislation up that has no chance of ever becoming law because the governor's not going to sign it, and put our members, our Republican members from an Oakland County area into a very compromised position to take a vote that's meaningless but might lose that seat going forward. So keep that in mind when you think about how come we haven't moved constitutional carry bills? How come we haven't moved pistol registration repeal bills? So very tough situations for people in those areas. And it's never going to get signed into law with this governor. So do we take that vote? We are absolutely trying to find some pro-gun legislation that we can move that this governor has to think about. And there are some areas where I think we can do that. But we can't just run wild and start putting everything out there for votes and compromising members for bills that aren't going to get signed in law. On the other hand, I am somebody who thinks sometimes we take some of these crazy ideas that are out there that are anti-gun and maybe we give that a committee hearing. We give that a vote and let people see what the other side is truly doing on these issues. So I think that there's a lot of strategy there, a lot of different ways we could handle this, but it is incredibly important that we keep that House and that Senate because right now these red flag law bills are not going to go anywhere. The other bills that Kevin talked about, they're not going to go anywhere. We have leadership standing strong in Lansing in both the House and the Senate, and we need to keep that.
Thank you, Shane. I want to take a brief moment. We have some other dignitaries in the audience and our county commissioners. We have Rick Warren, if you just raise your hand. Gary Roy, our chairman. Lenny Schneider, I believe, is here. Is there, Ian Kemp is here. Our county treasurer is here. Let's see, anybody else? Who is that? What is your... Judge Barner, okay. Judge Barner is here. And, Judge Conshu and Judge Barner, both judges are here. One is the circuit judge and one is the district court judge. Anybody else that I missed? Sorry, I didn't recognize you. All right. I believe now is the time that we're going to have questions and answers. So those of you who want to address, if our panel could come up here, maybe stand here, and then I will move this table. And if you could come around this way, we will use this portable microphone, and we could start the discussion. Oh, anybody who's got a question? Come on up here. Stand right here.
Well, I'm going to go off topic. The Fourth Amendment, it gives us a guarantee to be secure in our persons. Right now, we have a worldwide problem with the coronavirus. I don't know if anyone's looked into what's going on in Washington, but they're talking about medical martial law, and for sure, along that line, we would be quarantined. Along with the quarantine comes a vaccine. Vaccines are not proven. They can't be proven. This thing has morphed 4 times. Gentlemen, what are our rights as to a forced vaccine?
Who wants to address that issue?
Go ahead. Since I first here.
You can use that mic. Oh, okay.
Thank you for that question. And I thought I'd break the ice and step up first and not let Scott steal the thunder once again, and I thought I would speak here. Actually, truth of it is, he asked me that question before the debate, if you will, started here, and I was half joking when I said, ask me once we get up here. But it does raise an interesting issue about search, seizure, things like that. What if someone was forced into quarantine and they decided they didn't want to go? What's the sheriff going to do about that?
Of 6. That means every person will infect 6 people. So the quarantine isn't the issue, it's the vaccine that is the issue.
Additional issue, very good. The vaccine, forcing somebody to have vaccines against their will. That's not that uncommon of a question if we look at the way the question is framed, because that's what we do both on the legislative side, and that's what we do in the court system. I'm glad, Maurice, you recognized our 2 judges here, and I thought, well, who better to answer those questions, because they have to answer what's called the balance test. And what we do is we weigh the greater good for the state's interest. We call those compelling interests, and whether or not that outweighs the individual's right to be free from whatever, free from quarantine, free from having to take a vaccine. So, Judge Barnard, would you like the microphone? I'm just, she's not here. She's not here. But I can tell you about the process. I don't know the answer to that, and maybe somebody here does, but I can tell you the process. The process would require a balance test on the issue of whether or not your freedoms are outweighed by the greater good for the community. So, Scott, do you want to add to that, or?
I mentioned to you earlier when I said I mean, it's a great question, and it's obviously something that people are focusing on. It's the talk right now. But I also want to be honest with you. Until I can cross that bridge or know more about it, I'm not going to sit up here and blow smoke at you, because it's not something that I have even looked at or been on my radar from that side, especially with the different things we have going. Fantastic question. But I'd like to be able to research it more and give you a more educated answer so that it doesn't come across wrong.
Fortunately, we don't have that issue in Lapeer yet, although I have heard communications that people have traveled from China and have come back to Lapeer. So it's a very important issue. So thank you for that question.
Well, getting back to the issue at hand, I'm a little confused. The issue at hand is we're going to be a sanctuary county, and if I get this right, we're not going to enforce what we deem as an unconstitutional gun law. Is that correct?
If you're not.
By being a sanctuary Second Amendment county,
Correct.
We're taking a stand not to enforce what we deem an unconstitutional gun law? If I got that right, maybe I don't.
No. So you're saying by passing the sanctuary county,
Yeah.
that any existing gun law that we don't agree with is exempt?
No. Well, is that what you're saying?
No.
What are we saying?
We are saying that obviously the laws that we currently have, and we see what's happening in the grand scheme, the big picture across our country, that's where the word, when we kept saying of being symbolic, that we're sending a message that as these laws get discussed, and I know Kevin and Shane both said the stuff that we have on the legislative floor, as those things come down, we're sending the message that we're not okay with more restrictions. We're not okay with further infringements.
Okay,
But
so the laws we have as of today's date,
they're all intact. This doesn't change anything to do with our current laws.
okay, so the laws we have currently will be enforced.
Correct.
Any laws after today's date will be,
So when that was kind of what we talked about at the commission meetings and stuff, this doesn't change anything to the law. When we're talking about the symbolic side, it's the messages of what's trickling down towards us as what we see what's happening around us. Now, let's be honest with each other when we say, because even where Kevin and Mike both mentioned about enforcing the laws and some of those things that are in there, this resolution in this part of coming out from Lapeer County and from all these other counties that have gone, whatever the 13 number we're at, whatever it is now, 14, if Livingston did there tonight, it's saying we're not okay with the infringements. We're not okay with the things that you're bringing down the pipe in there. Now, if you don't believe, and obviously these two gentlemen can know more about it than what we do, but it's pretty strong when we talk about, A, the public standing up and sending a symbolic resolution, like we are doing here, that we're not okay with this. The other part of it is, too, is from, and I'm big, obviously work a lot with the lobbying side of MSA, Michigan Sheriff's Association. A lot of these things of the Sheriff's Association standing up and saying, we're not okay with whatever the example, fill in the blank, whatever those future restrictions that they're looking at, i.e. red flag laws. So it doesn't change any of our law side there, or anything that we're enforcing or what's coming down. It's hard for us to say. I can't even sit in front of you and say, okay, well, if this comes, what you're going to do, A, B, C, and D. I don't know until we get there. As I mentioned, I want it so that it sends the message of we're not okay with this. Just like I said earlier, if we continue down this path, good people aren't going to have weapons, bad people are.
Well, I agree with that, but I'm just trying to figure out how this is going to go. So they're going to pass a law next week, and we're going to look and say, okay, they just passed this. Nah, we don't like that one. They pass this one. Yeah, that one's not bad. We're going to enforce that one. Yeah, we don't like that one. Is this, am I on track, or we got to take them as they come down, or?
Yeah, I think because we could
I mean, are we going to have a resolution every time they pass a law?
Well, we could do hypothetical.
I'm not picking this apart. I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, no, I understand. It does not. This is strictly symbolic. This does not change any existing laws or any laws that would come down the pike. As in to get into the hypotheticals or this, that, I can't answer those questions because I don't know what those actually are going to be. We're trying to prepare and make sure that we stand together and understand as a group that we're sending a strong message as one of 83 counties that we are for the Second Amendment and no infringement on those rights.
I think he's asking about a case in controversy, is what he's asking. So if, in fact, we have the resolution and our laws are existing now, but if the legislature passes some law 2 weeks from now, and some citizen attacks the constitutionality of that, then you would have to address whether or not, in the court, whether or not it's legal or not. And that would be up to the prosecutor and the sheriff to decide, do we enforce this because we think it's unconstitutional, or do we take it to court because our oath requires us to uphold the laws of the state and then have the judicial system resolve that dispute. So that's one of the questions I think he's asking.
an example might be, say, for instance, if the legislature and the governor signed a law into place in Michigan that said the counties had the right to go remove guns out of people's homes. So you're put in a position at that point in time, if we're going to enforce laws, his job is to enforce. That is the Constitution. If we pass a law, that's part of the, technically that's part of the Constitution, right? So that puts you in a position, in a bad position, to have to put people in a dangerous position if you send your guys in there to remove guns.
So what would you do in that? I think that's where your question is.
And again, that's hypothetical. I don't know that he could answer what he would do.
What
and I don't want to put him in
if red flag laws? I hope we're being clear on what your question is.
Is it?
Yeah, I'm asking you, what does this mean? I mean, what are you going to do? I'm just...
Well, you were asking a prospective situation where a law comes down that might be deemed unconstitutional.
I'm asking what laws are we going to obey? If a law comes down and it's a law, okay, they pass a law, and it's a law we don't like, and it's a law we disagree with, and it's a law we feel is unconstitutional, but yet it's a law. It's been passed, and it's a law.
Right.
And we don't like it. We think it's a bunch of baloney, and it is a bunch of baloney. But damn it, they just passed it, and it's a law. What are we going to do about it? Are we going to ignore it? That's what I'm asking. Are we going to say we like this one but don't like that one? That's what I'm asking.
Here we go. The prosecutor is going to address it first.
Well, you can't. Well, you got to pass it. He can ignore it. But hey, he can't do anything till he puts me in front of you, right? You got it made. He arrests me, and you decide what to do about it.
Randy, I couldn't agree with you more. I'll sit down. Let me, in all fairness, Randy, you're good for the debate, and you always come up with some, not just provocative questions. You come up with issues that seem to hit the nail on the head. And what are we going to do with an issue that isn't before us? And my answer is much like my colleagues here on the issue of trying to talk about the enforcement of an issue that, one, is not likely to ever occur in the state of Michigan because of the dynamics of the way the House is set up. Both our House representative and our state senator spent some time talking about how the Republicans control both houses of our Congress, and we have a governor that's a Democrat. Is it likely that anything, a red flag law or anything else, or the hypothetical of our sheriff being ordered to go into somebody's house to take a gun, or any gun, or all the guns, will that ever happen? Let's just say that's not likely, but let's take it the next step further. And let's say if it does happen, the process does require, and then it eventually works its way to me, comes to my desk, and there's a criminal prosecution or a request from not just our sheriff, our state police, or the other 6 law enforcement agencies in this county. They present some sort of warrant review or warrant request for me. We then make a decision here to challenge the constitutionality of a law, and we do so through the process. Ultimately, I'm an advocate. I'm just an advocate for the people of this community and the judges. That's why I was sort of tongue-in-cheek putting it on the judge. But ultimately, constitutional issues have to be judicially reviewed. The legislature passes laws that are statutes. That's not the Constitution. That's not the Constitution. The legislative process is to pass legislation. That's not constitutional law. What happens is the challenges in the court determine whether or not those pass the test of being constitutional. So if I can somehow answer the question and at the same time not dodge it, I have to think in terms of, one, the likelihood of that ever happening. 2, if it does, the process will dictate, and you can count on us, is what I think is going to happen. That's never going to pass the legislature. It's never going to pass the Senate. It's never going to get to my desk, and it's never going to get to the sheriff to probably have to enforce. But to bring your question full circle to the confusion that you said, what does this resolution actually mean? And so that brings us full circle to say, well, that's what makes this resolution symbolic. Okay?
Is there, I've got a question of one of the judges. Yeah. Oh.
Can I maybe just address Randy's question a little clearer, at least from a county commission standpoint? And if my fellow commissioners disagree with me, jump up and yell. But I think your question is, what does this specific resolution do? And how is it going to be enforced? And I think it really does 2 things. Number one, at least from a county commission standpoint, number one, it sends a message to the governor and to the legislatures in Lansing. That's number one. The second thing it really does is it sends a message to, as a county commission, we're sending a message to our prosecutor and our sheriff that if a law is put into place and they deem that, or they feel that that law is unconstitutional, that we will stand behind them in challenging that law. And that's quite frankly very important, and the prosecutor touched on that earlier, because we're the funding unit. So if they're going to challenge that law, they're going to need funding from us to do so. Correct, Mr. Prosecutor?
You bet. You bet.
So I think those are the two things that this resolution actually does, and they're very important things, and I think we're sending not only a message to Lansing, but as a county commission, we're sending a message to our prosecutor and our sheriff that we have their back if they want to challenge a law that they feel is unconstitutional.
Well, gentlemen, again, I hopefully this next question won't be quite that difficult, but as a dad who's got 2 kids, 2 young adults that are heading out into this world, I want them to be able to legally defend themselves. Now, a lot of people think they know stand your ground, what it means. But as a parent who watches the news anymore, and sometimes it just gets terrified, anybody with kids and grandkids, I mean, it's really scary. And sometimes people misread or don't get those laws right and find themselves things just not right. You know, I mean, we've had some things that have been going on. What I'm looking for is, can you tell me what are the stand your ground laws and how do they impact us? And maybe some scenarios, the difference between doing it, legally defending yourself and not legally defending yourself. As an example of, you know, because I don't know what those laws are. I don't know exactly what they are. And again, this is something I told my kids that I was going to talk and ask about, because as they go out into the world, they're getting trained, they're doing everything they can to be legal, but what do we do? And in that sense, I'm looking as far as like necessarily like within their home or apartment or wherever they live. How does that apply as far as the, you know, I know that there's other things going on, and I don't want you guys to have to get into that, but I don't know what those laws are, exactly
Sure.
what those laws are and how they would impact my kids.
No, great question. So, and I know Prosecutor Sharkey can touch on some of the legal stuff with it after, but if you look at where we've come with Stand Your Ground, obviously when we used to be a castle doctrine state, that was where a lot of times where we looked at is that, and everyone said, and truthfully you'd have people joke about it all the time. What would people say? If you shot somebody in your home, make sure you drug them inside, right? Is what they would always say. The castle doctrine side of protecting your home led a little bit in some legislation or some rulings that came out in your vehicle or whatever abode was actually defined as. Now with the Stand Your Ground things, or with the rulings on this, Florida is probably our biggest Stand Your Ground. We've seen multiple cases that have been through there in the last few years. I mean, a lot. In Florida, I think at times there was a kind of a heavy weight is because there were so many so quickly. The truth of what Stand Your Ground is, you have the right to protect yourself. Where Stand Your Ground kind of led to with those, and even going into Florida, such as, i.e., the lady in the with her boyfriend and her child park in a handicap parking spot and walk in, and a gentleman who has a handicap sticker goes to pull into the parking spot. She doesn't have a handicap sticker. Confrontation starts. Boyfriend retreats after him, knocks him to the ground. He shoots and kills the guy. That's where Stand Your Ground in their mind, the argument side of it was that he had right to that place that he was in, or wanted to be in, meaning in the parking lot or that parking spot, which he actually ended up pulling up next to her. So the hard part is, and we get asked, and I do some of these things for the senior center and stuff, that where they talk about the hard part of this, with this one, there's real no black and white in the answers. Truthfully, what happens is a lot of times you're put into a position, it's on the books that we have that, and we have multiple times that it's upheld, that it's happened. But ultimately, what happens a lot of times too is it goes down and goes into the court system for the legal side to make that decision as in what they're going to do. And I get people that a lot of times that will say, what about this scenario? That's not really fair. I'd be doing you a disservice if I answered that. Because obviously we would have juries, we'd have judges, we have decisions, all the different things in there that ultimately comes down to that for us to say, well, here's our opinion based on that case. A lot of times those are tried. For example, the one I said with the parking spot there, that one, he got pled to manslaughter and was sentenced to 20 years in prison. But then there's others that have been the other way. I can honestly say some of the stand your ground, if we're going to talk openly about it, there's cases that I've seen that felt, my opinion, that it was a good case, that was a good argument. And then through the court system, it would go the other way, and vice versa. So I think it's a good step from, obviously a lot of people try to push stand your ground because they believe that it gives you a vendetta. It gives you that opportunity to take life. I don't personally feel that way. I think it makes you safe and your family safe, depending on the location you're in. But then there's a whole different ball game legality-wise to it.
Just another comment from Scott. He's got a presentation scheduled in North Branch for the Senior Coalition, I believe, the 22nd, I believe it is?
Just the end of the month, I'm not sure.
Yeah. So he will be making a presentation on that stand your ground proposition. There's another question.
Yeah, how you guys all doing? This is my first Tea Party meeting here, so glad to meet you guys and ladies here. You can hear it in my voice here. Sorry. Being a gun owner, I am getting very, very frustrated. Maybe I shouldn't say this. All right, I'll get the breath here. One of my guns, I will say this, is Class 3 destructive. You guys know what that is. Big money I have invested in these guns that I own. I see these red flag laws staring me in the face. And I don't want to admit this, guys, but it's coming. The way people are voting, it's coming. And now, on the stroke of midnight, they make these laws, and on the stroke of midnight, 1 minute later, now I'm public enemy number one. Go from a clean background all my life to now my guns are illegal. And the question I ask is, there's no laws that can protect me, is there?
Well, they're not illegal now, but that's when we talk about, and you're not out of line and being concerned about what could change. That's what's happened in Virginia. It basically has. And then, as Scott said at the very beginning, when he talked about if the law-abiding citizens lose all their weapons, who has them left over? Are the lawbreakers.
Virginia did pass a law that what few Republicans and a couple of Democrats, they did not pass it through. So they're good for at least 1 year, and you'll see a little bit of calm in Virginia for at least another year.
I'll add to it a little bit, too. I mean, you brought up red flag laws again, and I think one of the big issues with that is who determines what a red flag really is. I mean, I believe there's people out there who believe the fact that I own an AR-15 is a red flag that says I'm crazy, right? So, who's really making that determination? I know people who think that if you're conservative, you're a right-wing nut. We hear that word nut added to it a lot. And can somebody then just say, and will a court just determine that makes me a threat? And that's why red flag is such a concern. And what is that due process of law look like at that point? And I think, Randy, this goes back to your question, too. Let's say a red flag law does pass in Michigan. I can speak for me. I think I can probably speak for Kevin and say it probably passes without our votes. But let's say we get to a point where it does pass. That's where it falls back onto these resolutions and onto the locals of, are you going to truly go in and enforce that and take somebody's firearm? That's not a question I can answer. But I think that the concern with those truly is who is determining what is a red flag? What is something that truly says this person is unstable? And we see a culture today where an accusation is big enough, right? You are now guilty until proven innocent now. All you need to do is make an accusation about somebody that you don't like, and that is the huge concern with these laws.
I just wanted to address one further comment on this. We're avoiding the judicial system here. We have judges here. In order to attack the constitutionality of a law, a red flag law, such as Kevin proposed, and it does pass, and like you say, we're 3-4 seats away from that possibility. And we put the sheriff, who's got an oath to enforce the legislative action of the state of Michigan, to go in there and seize the weapons. And then we bring it to the prosecutor, who has to make a decision whether to prosecute. If he doesn't prosecute, he may be in jeopardy of his oath of office. But in order to affect the constitutionality of that legislation, you may have to arrest somebody, and you may have to litigate it, and the judge has to go and make a decision on it, which is a case in controversy, and then there has to be a ruling on it. And if the lower court rules it's unconstitutional, obviously it's going to have to go up through the process. And a judicial determination is the one that ultimately resolves it. Now, when we talked about the red flag or stand your ground, every one of those examples you addressed today was an example of judicial determination. Was it manslaughter? Did they have the right to self-defense? It becomes a case in controversy and a fact dispute and a legal determination. So it is, you guys are, and that's the issue. I think that it's not the resolution, the symbol that's going in there. We're talking about the legal aspects that Randy's addressing. The resolution is a symbol. But if, in fact, the legislature comes along and we, unfortunately, are put in a position that we become West Virginia, then we got issues.
Well, and I think that let's not lose sight, I agree 100% with you, let's not lose sight of why this sanctuary county, why this resolution even exists.
Right.
And even like with Randy said, I understand the question, or where do we go with that. This is about momentum. This is about coming together. And what do I mean by that? So I've said it openly. I know they played it on the news and everywhere else with it. I'm against red flag laws. I'm against it. And for a lot of the same things that the representative said. When you have sanctuary county stuff that comes in that says Lapeer County, and let's say whatever that number is, if it's 83 that we get, 83 counties, there's 83 counties in Michigan. Maybe we get every one of them. Maybe we get 75 of them. It sends a pretty good message. Michigan Sheriff's Association, obviously because every sheriff in 83 counties are involved in these same meetings right now. We come out strong as an organization as into, we're not okay with this. So then it puts a lot more pressure on these groups, and as people pick away and start standing up and speaking about what they truly believe in, that's when things start happening. So to say, you know what, talking both sides, red flag laws. There's not anybody in this room that I don't believe would raise their hand and say, do you believe that the mental health system in our country is the most broken of any of them? It is. It truly is. And so we look at those things, and there's not a lot of us sitting realizing, and I've had case after case, and all of us have been involved with, of people that were in a position that shouldn't have had weapons, okay? But that's not the answer. To have a family member that's involved in a divorce, or somebody that's involved in a child custody, that wants to try to get even with somebody, to go say, to take their weapons, to bring them in front of one of our judges, afford that person zero due process, and then on the same side of it is, then try to find them a danger to themselves or others with no mental health evaluation whatsoever. How can we do that? So when we look at these things as they come down the pipe, that's the part where it is to say, what is that future going to hold, or to try to be hypothetical with it? I don't know, but I do know that in this room and in this resolution at top of it says, hey, we're on the same page. And hey, we are paying attention to these things. I can't answer what's going to happen next year or 4 years from now. But I can say that we're standing here together, making a statement out there that gets people's attention to saying is, we're done with it. We're sick and tired of those infringements, and we're coming together to say that. When this group, 13, 18, 20, 30, 75, 83 counties. MSA gets involved. All these other groups get involved. Somebody's got to listen, or somebody doesn't get elected.
I'm your former representative. I was in the State House, and when the term sanctuary was used, I was really apprehensive because of the sanctuary in California and sanctuary in New York. So are we going to cause confusion all throughout America where you can go, you know, and have Judge Roy Beans all over the place and what they're going to follow or what they're going to call? You understand where I'm going with this? I had a problem with the word sanctuary. A resolution is a resolution. It could have been done just as a resolution with the same impact, I think, throughout. And I'd like to switch gears here, though. And it is showing, I think it's really well that it's showing a message to Lansing. But our preamble of our Constitution, the reason why the Constitution was written, for us to retain the blessings upon ourselves, our children, and our posterity. That means our future children. And then our Declaration of Independence, that our rights are endowed by our Creator. We're looking to man. I really, you know, when we look to men and limit that to our rights and all that, they're going to take them away. We need to cry out to God, our Creator. The first Constitution was written from the Declaration of Independence. And those men were fighting for their lives. And they were, you know, ministers every day playing. But this is bigger than just the Second Amendment. This is principles of God, of the values that we hold in the creative moral design. Now we have sanctuary cities in Texas that they can't have abortions, but then they can just go down and kill a baby live from birth. What about the innocency there? What about the protection of that rights, of that voice, the freedom of rights that they can't even speak for themselves? So we're in a grave, I'd hate to be a sheriff or in the police right now, because you're making so many judgment calls on what your conscience is saying and what the law is saying, and who knows, God forbid, you're going to have to make a decision. Am I making the right decision? And it's the lawyers. Look what they did to our president, a godly man. Put that on record in the paper, Jeff. But I know this isn't a question for you, but I'm proposing why sanctuary? Why that word? And we're protecting those that hold different principles, that those forefathers had those rights, that their house couldn't be quartered. Their wives weren't given to the British soldiers. We're talking serious matters here, but I think we're talking more serious now as then, when they can get that far, spending hundreds of millions of dollars on an impeachment that was nothing more than a farce. And it's your money and all that, your money and all that. And you had the concern about the vaccine. Unfortunately, your governor could mandate a vaccine, an executive decision. We got to get the right governor, we got to get the right people, and we got to get behind and following our Creator again.
Thank you very much for that.
Yeah, I just wanted to answer your question on sanctuary. By the way, Ian did a great job of explaining what it's about. The sheriff was awesome the other day. We were proud that he stood up. I watched down there when I was in Florida during the Christmas holiday, and I watched the sheriffs out there. They were protesting with us. They were standing in line saying, you're going to step out for this, you're going to do that red laws, and you're going to do those AK-47s, and you're going to come into our home and take them out. They were standing saying they couldn't do it. What we're doing with the sanctuary in the county, sanctuary, and they gave you the definition earlier, it's a safe haven. It's not a bad word. What we have as PC is a bad word. The PC crowd is trying to change all our words to make them bad. Sanctuary started out years and years ago in the Bible. And your church is a sanctuary. We have wildlife sanctuaries, bird sanctuaries. They turned it into illegals. We're not talking about protecting illegals. Sanctuary is a safe haven. Lapeer County is a safe haven, free if you own a gun. That's all that's saying. The verbiage that we're doing, the symbol that we're doing, is we're saying to the county or to the state, that if I'm in how many veterans are in here? Raise your hand. And we thank you for that. And I myself am one. But I do want to tell you, though, if you're in combat and you're going to go in a foxhole, I want to know that the guy in the foxhole next to me is going to have my back. And what we're saying is that we're, as a sanctuary county, we're going to have your back, and we're going to have the sheriff's back when he stands up for us. That's what that's all means. But sanctuary is a good word. The rainbow is a good word. They've turned it to make it sound like it's a bad word. That's in the Bible. So, and there's the word. But that's all I want to say about it.
All right.
Hello. I'll apologize. I get a little nervous speaking in public, but I've had a lot of talk about the Second Amendment and how important it is to preserving our rights. It's important that we hold our elected officials' feet to the fire in support of our rights at all levels. I want to thank our Lapeer Board of Commissioners and our other officials that have supported those rights. With that being said, this is going to be an unpopular opinion with some people, but a couple Board of Commissioners members did not vote in favor of this resolution. And my personal opinion, I don't care about the excuses. It's time to hold our elected officials accountable. We are going to lose our rights if we don't get the right people in office. With that being said, I am looking for a couple of people to run for the Board of Commissioners this fall, to replace a couple people that did not vote in favor of this. I'm not going to name their names out loud. If you're interested in hearing more, I'll hang out after the meeting and just come see me. Thank you.
Anyone else that would like to address the panel? Well, I would like to. Is there any comments, additional comments that the members would like to say? Closing statements. Closing argument.
Sounds like an attorney to me.
Prosecutor Sharkey is going to close. I'll let you make the closing statement.
Thank you again, Keir. The hour is getting late, and the worst thing you can do is hand a lawyer a microphone when everybody's trying to run out the door. But I'll be brief. Famous last words are, I'll be brief. But let me just say one thing. I'm proud to have come here. I'm proud and humbled to be elected by this community to serve in this capacity, and I enjoy debates like this, and I welcome that. Good for you for making a stand on these issues, and good for you to bring it to the commissioners, and good for the commissioners who took a stand, and good for those who actually went the other way. That's the process. And I'm also very proud to be up here on this panel with your sheriff. To me, he's a superstar, a rock star, and Kevin, the same thing. What terrific people. And what the closing point I want to emphasize is that you can count on us to support this issue. And there is a common thing. We're all talking today about the common issue that brings us together on this issue. But there are other things that are common that bring to mind here that should give you confidence that these are issues that you can trust that we will take seriously. Both Kevin and I and the sheriff, we're all Irish. That's number one. All Irish. I had to ask the sheriff here what was his mother's maiden name so she could tell me, and he said, we're 100% Irish. I said, well, that's a good thing. We also went to school together. We all went to the same Catholic school. And don't hold that against us, but we also grew up in this community, and we know what you're talking about because people like you are not just our friends, but you're our neighbors, and you can, as I say, count on us to be the Irish Mafia, and we will block any effort or any attempt to do it. You can trust us there. Too bad the nomination for the Academy Awards, there was the Irishman, maybe you've seen that here. I was rooting very hard for that, but my vote didn't count. But thank you again for coming. Thank you, Maurice. Thank you, and thank you, Harry, for the good job. Thank you.
I'm just going to summarize very quickly that I moved here 7.5, 8 years ago. Unfortunately, I'm not Irish, but my father thought he was. Always wore a green suit in court, was famous in Detroit, worked on constitutional issues. And Shane is not Irish, but I feel like I'm a brother to him. And whatever nationality, it doesn't matter. These people here in Lapeer County, I am privileged and honored to be a part of. I think my wife and I echo those sentiments. And the friends I've met here, this gentleman here, Bill Gavette, as we started off the presentation, this is a gentleman. This is a true gentleman. Every one of these people on this diocese, they're tremendous people. They believe in the Constitution. They believe in adhering to your rights to protect you. So we're all citizens in this group. Now, we came from Oakland County, and I will tell you there is a world of difference down there. There is a world of difference, and I keep telling everybody, and I warn everybody, the buffer zone is Metamora. The spread of the disease of Oakland County is buffered by Metamora. Now, we joke about that, right? But I'm not joking. And I'm telling you that I know what's going on in Oakland County, and it's not good. So be careful. And you're in Lapeer County, and we have rights. We believe in our rights. We're rural, we're agricultural, we're large tract owners, and we're retirees. The demographics show that we're 43% retirees in this community. We don't like taxation, but we're the Lapeer Tea Party, right? We don't like taxation without representation. So that's the comments I want to make. And these gentlemen here, well, I love them. That's my belief. So I just wanted to make that clear, and I thank you. And they're going to stay around for a little bit, but we're going to go on with our meeting. We're going to do the summary of upcoming events, and that's going to be, I believe that's Carol. Let's go back out of here.